Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the High Ticket Coaching and Consultant Strategy and Growth Show. Now, if you're watching this interview anywhere else but within our private community called High Ticket Client Attraction Insider Circle, then definitely come check us out. We'd definitely love to have you. So today I want to introduce you to one of the members of our community, Regina DeAngelis. Welcome, Regina.
Thank you so much.
Awesome, you're welcome. So tell us, what is it that you do?
So I have a business. I like to call myself a reformed divorce attorney, but I am an attorney, and the business that I created 3 years ago is called Family Transitions. So after doing the traditional, really toxic practice of divorce law for almost 2 decades, 18 years, I switched gears completely and started I'm calling it a coaching business because I don't go into court with people, but I literally help families. I coach them through the transition from their traditional family unit to what I'm saying is a new form of family unit. And so that's what, and my coaching business is called Family Transitions, Divorce Coaching and Mediation.
Awesome, love it, love it. So what got you, why did you make the shift? What made you, what caused you to make the shift?
I had done, I have a very, as you get older, your story gets more interesting. I had come out of law school and really felt a desire to help people. And I thought, I could do this as a divorce attorney and help making it easier for the kids. And the reality was not that at all. But as I got older and had my own children, my oldest son has a condition called Duchenne muscular dystrophy, which is degenerative. And as he was getting sicker, I was feeling more and more frustrated by spending my days kind of dealing with all this toxic energy and then coming home and really having to struggle with the reality of what was going on with my son. And then about 7 or 8 years after he was diagnosed, I went through my own divorce, and I just knew that it didn't need to go the way it was going. But my ex, and so many people I think in America, come from the same perspective. My ex was saying, no, you want a divorce. This is the way divorce goes. And there was no opening up of his viewpoint to say, really, it can be any way you choose. But if you're going to play within the traditional parameters of the courthouse, it's realistic to say, no, this is the way it goes. This is how divorce is. But if you decide that you're going to work with your spouse to kind of really form a new positive reality, you guys have complete control over what that looks like. So that's how it evolved after all of that.
Yeah, love it, love it. Now, the question now becomes in terms of when you work with your clients, do you work with both partners at the same time, or is it individual?
Right. So most of my clients are couples. And so where I am right now is I'm doing a lot of virtual mediations where they'll both come to me. It started out helping individuals, and I still will. So I really have a lot of flexibility, because if 2 people come to me, they have the same goal, and I can then very easily help them navigate the process. And I have a really specific formula that I developed that is different than a traditional mediation in a lot of ways, but it really takes them through almost an emotional intelligence training so that they are developing empathy and compassion for where each of them are coming from. And once they can get to that point, then they're more willing to work together and maybe give a little more than they anticipated, or make some decisions that they weren't really thinking about when they decided to get divorced. But if someone comes to me individually, usually that person is in a situation where the spouse doesn't believe that there can be a positive family transition, or they're out for revenge and are coming from that place of fear, which is the natural reaction when you get divorce paperwork. In that case, I really help the individual, and I work with their litigation attorney. I help them to manage expectations, address positive mindset principles, really help get them emotionally prepared for their next steps as chaos is going on in the background.
Awesome. So when When does someone when would someone come to the realization that they actually do need your services? Is it when they're actually going through the process? Is it before, like when is that?
Yeah, I try to get the message out. I think the absolute best time to find me is before anybody has actually filed a divorce complaint, was what we call it in the Philadelphia area, or your divorce petition, your divorce paperwork. Because I don't practice law, and what I do is not legal specific. And mediation is really dealing with the issues surrounding divorce. But when someone gets divorce paperwork in the mail, even if you think you're going to have an amicable divorce, that's your intention, the other person gets served with legal papers, and these legal documents say all over them, like, you have been sued in court. You are listed as the defendant or the respondent, and it immediately puts you on the defensive. And from that position, a human being's natural instinct is that fight or flight response. They go out and hire an attorney. And what my experience has shown me is that once both parties have hired attorneys, they almost give away their voice. They lose their confidence in communicating with their spouse and making decisions for themselves. And they really hand their power over to two parties, the lawyers, who don't know the reality of their family, who don't know maybe for sure what is best. And so from my perspective, it's best to have a conversation with me ahead of time before either party is put on the defensive in that way. And then you have the option always of hiring a private attorney at any point in the process. And obviously, like, before you would ever sign any sort of agreement, you would want to have that reviewed by an attorney on your behalf.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I don't know how many attorneys are out there, and I am one. So I always say, like, attorneys make it worse at the beginning anyway. You might need one later on.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So ultimately, you're kind of like in the middle then. You're kind of like a support system then.
Yes, I really try to, and the support system is a really good way of saying it. Like, I really try to hold these both parties up. They're in such emotional pain, and even the person who wanted the divorce, and in 85% of cases, it's the woman for some reason, is the one who actually pulls the trigger and says she wants the divorce. There has to be some empathy and compassion for the husband who is maybe blindsided, totally financially terrified. And so I really need them to understand there is a grief process. A divorce is an absolute loss, and both parties need to sort of mourn that in their own way. And I really try to support them through that process and make sure they're communicating effectively to understand where each is coming from and where they are in that process.
Mm-hmm. Now, how do you find it typically? Do you find that typically when the partners get to a point of divorce, are they wanting to even communicate with each other, or is it typically, this is separate? Well, what do you find?
Yeah, I think they're afraid to communicate with each other. And certainly if you go off and hire private attorneys, that, in my experience, is the end of communication. They think, I'm paying you to do that for me, which is not a good situation. You, I think, like anything else in life, have to do what is best and follow your conscience. And so what I find is most effective for my clients is to give them an education on the system. And if you go into Facebook and any of the divorce support groups, there's horror stories are universal about, it cost me $40,000 and I'm still not divorced yet, and all I have is a house and a 401k. These horror stories are universal. And when someone finds me, I kind of sit down with them, both, usually individually. I'll have this conversation first with the one party and then with the next. And say, look, here's how the traditional divorce system goes. There's no question that my approach to this is not traditional. Even within the realm of divorce mediation, I'm doing it differently because so am trying to build these bridges. It's not just about splitting assets. It's really about, let's try to rebuild some respect. Let's try to rebuild some communication so that you know you're making the best out of a really bad situation. And after I talk to them individually and kind of say, you're both going to need to go retain somebody around here. It's going to cost each of you $5,000 just to retain a lawyer. That's $10,000 that your family could use to rebuild. That could be a car payment for one or both of you, a down payment on the next house. After I have that conversation, 100% of the time, they agree to sit down with me because they know what their options are.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Now, what about mistakes, right? What mistakes do you see most often is made by the individuals going through the process? Basically, I guess simple mistakes that you're like, man, if you just avoided this or that, things could be way better. Are there any common mistakes you typically see?
Yeah, I think with universally, again, with the divorce process, and I think the traditional divorce process really perpetuates this mistake, is your natural instinct of shifting back into what I call the shame and blame game, right? That, feels like a personal failure to say you're getting divorced for sure. And the natural instinct is to start shifting blame. That is the absolute number one mistake that everyone can make who's hoping to get through divorce without kind of slash and burn toxicity. And so I set some really strong ground rules that we're moving forward from today. I don't want to hear how you got to this point with that we need a divorce. And obviously I can make some assumptions. If things were great, we wouldn't be here. Nobody wants to be here. But shifting into blame and making decisions out of guilt, that's not good because you could come to regret that decision later. So carrying shame or blame is going to really prevent you from moving forward in a positive way. And so that's the absolute most common mistake, but it's also the most natural thing to do when you're in the traditional divorce arena.
Mm-hmm. Now, what about with clients? Do you work with clients locally, nationally, globally?
Yeah, what I have done is developed a practice where a lot of my face-to-face clients are here, but on my website, I have materials that people can download and that are common issues. It's things like, how do we decide whether or not we're going to keep the house? And I don't want to pay $300 to my attorney to go do this, or retain an attorney to get these questions answered. So I've covered like really general talking points that are common to every divorce. Things like, how do we figure out a custody arrangement? How do we have a conversation about this without getting attorneys involved? So my coaching business is growing to include some more of that virtual sort of coaching. And then I have a private Facebook group and a YouTube channel. So sort of those traditional channels of reaching people and helping them get answers.
Mm-hmm. Awesome, love it. So what about, I guess in terms of, has COVID-19 affected your practice at all, or did you shift to online?
Yeah, I shifted to online and I've gotten, I've continued. What's funny to me is I think a lot of my clients have used it as an opportunity to say, okay, we have time now to kind of focus on this, because so much of the day-to-day real life activities, divorce is the last thing anybody wants to focus on. So I've actually been steady. My business has remained the same through COVID, and I'll be curious to see what happens afterwards if families are deciding, it's time to put an end to this situation, if I get much busier after COVID.
Mm-hmm. Okay, perfect. So what's your
Yeah.
vision? What is your current vision as far as the direction you head with your business at the moment?
Yeah, I think what for sure will be growing into is doing online courses and webinars dealing with, like what you said, how to avoid these most common mistakes, and really sort of training people to have the confidence to have these conversations on their own. When I say you need to approach your divorce process with empathy and compassion and gratitude, people, I mean, I don't sound silly, but like people think I'm crazy, right? But what I want to train them to do is to understand that those mindset shifts and learning to find the positive in what is an incredibly negative situation can put your family on a positive path. It's game changing for you and your children as you move forward. So I would continue. I have all those materials and the content written, but now I'm at the stage where I've just started to create the actual online course.
Mm-hmm. Awesome, awesome, love it. So I guess let's get back to the Regina then. So
Yeah.
Regina, with your level of success you've created for yourself in your life and your business and stuff like that, what's one skill you'd say you've mastered that's really gotten you to your level of success today?
Uh, I think that's, for me, hands down, my ability to relate to people, and especially my story at this point where I can say to my clients, I've been through this myself, and I know personally how you can avoid some of these mistakes. And between my own personal story and my professional experience doing that, I've seen really everything. But I have an ability to reach people that I think comes natural. Not everybody has, people are good at different things, but my clients have a level of comfort, and that's critical in any lawyer client or mediation relationship. You have to trust the person that you're there with, and you have to have a rapport with them. So I think that's a really important skill that I bring to my clients to try and make them more comfortable.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So how did you, in terms of before you started your business, as you said, you were an attorney as well too. What got
Yeah.
you on that path? What got you to actually saying, okay, I want to be an attorney, and this I'm going to spend that portion of my life?
Right. I do think, in your 40s, maybe everybody does some sort of transition. When I decided I wanted to be an attorney at a really young age, but not a divorce attorney, I doubt anybody decides at a young age they want to be a divorce attorney. I thought I wanted to be an environmental attorney and go out and, work for the EPA and deal with issues of pollution and that sort of thing. But as I got through law school, I met the man who would become my husband and decided I wasn't going to move back to Washington, D.C., which is where I had gone to college. And so life just kind of took a different path. And I fell into the divorce work because I knew that I was feeling very unfulfilled in the traditional personal injury, which is where most new attorneys land. I think, you pay your dues working in a personal injury firm or for insurance defense. I was feeling incredibly unfulfilled and thought, I can help people. I knew I wanted to make a positive difference. And that's how I ended up in divorce law, and I stayed there for 18 years.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Do you miss it at all, or is it just like, hey, rearview mirror, that's his next
Oh my
level?
gosh. No, I don't miss it at all. And I don't know how many attorneys are out there listening, but we laugh, there being a traditional like billable hour lawyer is a really hard way to make a living. And it's an intensely there's an intense pressure all the time for that. And especially if you're dealing with a subject matter that's so toxic and negative emotionally. And so I don't miss it at all. I feel like life is really too short, and a lot of times people get so wrapped up in their divorce process that they're wasting precious months and years where they could be really moving forward in a positive way.
Mm-hmm. Love that, love that. So ultimately you made the shift, and now you're basically doing things on your own terms, right? Versus having to be either having to follow whatever process that maybe someone else created. Now you're in essence in control of how you approach it.
Right. That's exactly right. And it really does feel great because I haven't had to do this, but I've threatened, the freedom to say to my clients, you know what, I know what I'm saying is unconventional. And if you're not okay with it, you can go find a traditional mediator. You can choose another path. But I've also decided for myself personally, I chose this path specifically because I didn't want to be involved in that sort of toxic process. And if my clients don't sort of want to play along, if they're not, you have to be willing to get into the mindset. And I say to them, that's what you're paying me for. You're paying me. I know it sounds crazy. Just trust me, it works. The freedom to be able to say, it's not for everybody, but it feels great. There's no question.
I love it. I love it. So you mentioned resources as well. So for someone who might be considering or might have some questions about things. So what were those resources you mentioned?
Yeah, so on my website, which is ftdivorcecoaching.com, because it's Family Transitions is the name of the business. There's a blog where you can read about my experiences, and there's a series of PDFs that cover different topics in divorce, because there's issues that are universal in every divorce. Now, how your state would treat the marital assets in terms of the division of property. Are there rules about that? Or are there rules about the length of alimony? Those are the kinds of questions you would need to ask an attorney locally to kind of get the gist of how the local divorce rules work. But the decisions, first of all, like, do you even want to get a divorce? How do you know it's time? How do you know that's an appropriate move forward? Even something as simple as that, people question themselves. So we start really at the beginning and move through, okay, now you've decided, what's your next step? How do you think about the house and the retirement accounts? Those sorts of things are the resources you can access on my website.
What about, are you pretty active on social media as well too? Can someone reach out via social media?
Yes, yeah. So I'm on Facebook at FT Divorce Coaching, and I have a business page and a private group that they can ask to join. And so the private group is really sort of a support group where people post questions, and there's a lot of positive affirmations and just reminding people that, this too shall pass. Like, you're going to get through this and really be okay on the other side. And then all my contact information is on my business page, and my email address and everything, and my cell phone number. So I'm very accessible nationwide, I guess.
Awesome, love it. What's the name of your Facebook group?
Say that again?
What's the name of your Facebook group?
It's ftdivorcecoaching.com, Family Transitions.
Oh, that's the name of the Facebook group as well too?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
So that's, and I actually do post mostly on Facebook. I know I should be more on Instagram, but I just haven't. It's because I'm old fashioned. I still like to create things on my computer, and Instagram, I have to do it on my phone. So I have a hang up about that. I need to have my teenage children help me, coach me through that a little bit more. But yeah, and the name of the business is Family Transitions.
Awesome, Regina. Well, hey, we're running short on time here, but it was definitely a pleasure having you on here today, and basically introducing you to the community to share with them what you do.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I love talking about like my somewhat unconventional message, but you can't, change never happens if you keep doing things the same way.
Awesome, love it. So before we end here, do you have any final thoughts to leave the audience with?
Yeah, I really do hope that people kind of listen to the direction I want to go with an open mind, and really take to heart this idea that we're not going to move forward in a positive fashion if we keep doing things the same way that we always did, for sure. And I think in 2020, we've come a long way in society in a lot of different ways. And the one aspect of life that has not changed since the 1960s and 70s is the divorce code in a lot of places.
Awesome, love it.
So,
well, again, Thank you so much again, Regina, and we'll be in touch, okay?
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time.
Awesome. Have a good
Have
one.
a, thank you.